Everyone, my name is Peter. I'm the chapter chair of the executive committee here at Vermont Chapter's Sierra Club. Joined with me is Rob Kidd of the Sierra Club as well. He's our one staff person who's been doing a lot of work on transportation, and we're really excited to be hosting Transit Equity Day here. This is a broader national movement that is consistent of all types of groups who want to focus on transportation as a civil right. It coincides with February 4th, Rosa Parks' birthday, one of the more iconic figures in civil rights era, as well as the transportation fight. And this day of support is to, collect and contribute across each of our activist areas with respect to transportation to sort of push a broader strategy for a just transition from fossil fuel economies, from fossil fuel and polluting transportation to cleaner, walkable, bikeable, and busable types of ways to get around Vermont, ways to get around your local town, anything that can help us reduce carbon through the transportation sector. Vermont contributes about half of its carbon emissions from transportation. And so if we want to make great strides in our little state, working on transportation, cleaning up this sector of the economy, it really goes a long way to making not only the world, but Vermont a brighter, more accessible place for everyone. Joining me are a number of activists who are involved with a number of different types of work across Vermont, all of which have some themes of transportation. Amanda Carlson, who is at Capstone. She'll be our first speaker of the night. We also have Madeline Sharrow, who is working with Migrant Justice. She is a great story to tell about a real big success with respect to transportation policy in Vermont. John Copans from the Old Spokes Home. He's our bike rep who is going to be talking to us about the need for broad transportation change with respect to biking infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure, you name it. And Randy Schoonmaker, who is the CEO of Southeast Vermont's Transit Association, and he's also in charge of the Mover group, an organization that has been moving people all around in a great, really, really fun looking van, which I really hope one day will be my midlife crisis. Just running around in a van that looks like a cow. Well, with that, I'm going to kick it off to Amanda Carlson to give us a little insight into what she's working on through Capstone and her new initiative. Take it away, Amanda, whenever you're ready.
All right. Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. My name is Amanda Carlson, and I work at Capstone Community Action in Barre, Vermont. Before I start sharing slides, I'll just give you some background information about the transportation program that Capstone has been planning and building for the past couple of years, but quickly wanted to root you all on who Capstone is and why they got interested in starting a transportation service. Capstone is an anti-poverty organization, and we provide a suite of services that range from crisis housing assistance to a food shelf. We offer financial coaching services, and then we're involved in the energy world by offering home weatherization services and energy upgrades. And then a couple of years ago, we started to look at transportation because there had just been years and years of stories of people unable to get out of poverty because of lack of transportation in their lives. And one quote that I heard my boss say again today that I love and I think is really speaks to how critical transportation access is that this was a study from rural Wisconsin, which said having a vehicle and a driver's license is a greater indicator of getting off of public assistance than a high school diploma. So not to say that a car and a driver's license or a car is the solution for our greater public, but just more emphasizing that transportation is such a significant impact in people's lives. And if they don't have that, that's a significant barrier for upward economic mobility. So now I will dive into my slideshow to talk about Community Rides Vermont. Okay, we all seeing that? Great. So
Amanda,
Capstone.
you may want to put it in presentation mode because we see your whole screen. So I don't know if you want to do it like that or.
No, I would like to put it in presentation mode. Thank you. Okay, so in order to address transportation problems that Capstone has witnessed for many, many years, we started to think about what does a useful, accessible transportation service look like that helps people tackle poverty and gain access to everyday services. So we have recently started a new nonprofit called Community Rides Vermont. And unlike the other people that you'll be hearing from tonight, we are a new service, a brand new service. So we will be launching in a couple of months and providing services. So we don't have a website to share or a Twitter to share, but I will get information out to Vermonters as soon as that is available. So we really describe ourselves as an urban transportation solution scaled for rural Vermont, which is a mix of public transit and a taxi and Uber-like system that can bring people from their homes to their final destination in a door-to-door manner. And we are going to have a fleet of all-electric vehicles and provide a service that weaves together public funding, private funding, and brings a service to the market that's reliable and flexible, which is something through our research that is something that we heard from people out in the community, that I'm interested in rural Uber, I'm interested in a taxi service, those types of things might really suit my needs, but they're just not reliable and they're not affordable. So that is something that Community Rides Vermont is trying to do. So just getting into some of the unmet needs that we heard from in the community doing our research. This slide really alludes to the challenges that comes with vehicle ownership in terms of highest vehicle miles traveled out of any other Northeastern state to reach employment, to reach necessary services. The vehicle maintenance costs are totally prohibitive for many of the people that we work with. The terrain in Vermont, dirt roads, steep ruts, and salt breaking up cars. Vehicles are a significant expense for people and just inaccessible in many ways. This slide, I'll pause and let you all read, but this slide really highlights some gaps that we've heard in the public transit system that we'll be particularly trying to address. So this woman is expressing that for someone that is reliant on the public transportation system, that often there's a lot of different criteria that you must meet to get a ride. So one of the things that we're going to be trying to do is limit the criteria of being a trip just to the grocery store or to a doctor's appointment and really widen the scope of who can get a subsidized ride when and where to. So to talk more about Community Rides Vermont, Community Rides Vermont is a dynamic mobility company, and the innovation that we really bring is going to be weaving together a lot of funding sources. We've recently partnered with Green Mountain Transit to help them provide extra capacity in some of their demand response programs. So that will provide a level of stability to our program. And we've also heard from many other businesses locally, whether that's from local manufacturers, the hospital, that are looking for a reliable transportation service that they can either have for their employees or their clients. And we also are partnering with local social service agencies that also need rides for their clients. And with all these various funding sources, we hope to create a service that's efficient, financially stable, and flexible and reliable for the public. This map here talks about our service area, and the orange shaded lines are the existing public transit routes in Vermont. And this light green shaded area is where our service area for Community Rides Vermont once we launch, which is all of Washington County most of Washington County and a few neighboring towns in Orange County. And the goal of our service is really to reach people at the far corners of this map. So the back roads, the areas that buses definitely aren't traveling to, and then either connect people to bus lines or bring them to their final destination. So a few more details about our plan. We're starting with 4 electric cars, and we're going to have a mobile application a few months after service launch. People will be able to call by phone, as we've heard that in other microtransit pilots happening, that access to calling someone is really important, that a lot of people don't rely on an app, though some people really like the app. So we see the need for both an app and still a live person to talk to. Our service, we want to be flexible enough to make multiple stops and string trips together, similar to what someone would do with their own vehicle, leave work, go to the grocery store, run errands. So that's another facet of our program. We aspire to be able to offer car seats in our vehicles, which isn't something that's typically allowed in the public transit realm due to some federal regulations, but our service is really aiming to go above and beyond and offer the services that have been very challenging to offer in years past. And this is the last slide I have for you. This just kind of big overview of what we hope our impact will be. In terms of the climate justice piece, we envision our service as a way for all Vermonters to participate in the EV revolution, and also just to check out what EVs are about, go for a ride, ask questions. And as I said, we hope to bring people to work both early morning, first shift, third shift, and really targeting the gaps in the current public transit system. And really want to highlight the improved quality of life, because that is what we heard in most of our research before we launched the service, is that for spur of the moment trips that we're privileged to take every day, oh, I forgot this thing, or I want to go meet someone, it just isn't a public transportation solution for that unless you live on a bus line. So we want to bring a higher quality of life for those that use our service. So I will stop there and pass it on to the next presenter, and happy to answer any questions at the end.
Thanks, Amanda. We'll have to share through our email service the website that you get when you get that set up, so people can continue to follow your work.
Great.
Up next is Madeline.
Yeah.
From Migrant Justice.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to share my screen as well. So hopefully y'all can see that. But yeah, my name is Madeline, part of the Migrant Justice team, and want to thank the Sierra Club for including us, and thanks to everyone for being here tonight. I'm going to start by just introducing Migrant Justice is a grassroots organization that was founded by farm workers and continues to be led by immigrant farm workers who are working primarily in the dairy industry in Vermont. And our mission is to build the voice, capacity, and the power of the farm worker community, and also to engage allies to advance human rights and economic justice. And a little bit about how Migrant Justice organizes is through community assemblies, where farm workers gather by region to come together socially and share food and a space, but also to talk about what issues people are facing and to identify common problems and then talk about collective solutions. So these are some photos from these spaces. And I wanted to spend some time talking about the first campaign that farm workers decided to launch back in 2012, which was a driver's license campaign for the migrant farm worker community to gain access to driver's licenses in the state of Vermont, regardless of immigration status. And that was really important because for most immigrant dairy farm workers in Vermont, there's no program or path or avenue for getting citizenship or legal status in the US. And so this led to farm workers being really dependent on their employers to bring them to the store, for example, to get food every week, every 2 weeks. And lots of people were having issues with having access to food, just having enough food in the house, literally. And people were also bringing up issues of not being able to get out to go to the doctors, for example, or bring their kids to school. And then even like the quality of life stuff that Amanda was talking about, going out to socialize or visit family or really do anything for fun. And so these issues led the community to decide on creating this campaign around access to freedom of movement and really frame it as a human right. And so that's what created the driver's license campaign. So farm workers worked really hard, and this is a photo I really like from that time when farm workers were going to testify before the legislature in Montpelier, and then won this campaign in 2013, which has had a really huge impact for the community, not just the migrant farm worker community, but the immigrant community in general in the state, being able to be more independent, more autonomous, and really being able to access these fundamental and basic needs. But despite this big win with access to transportation, farm workers are continuing to bring to the table issues that they're experiencing at work and with housing, because on farms, housing is almost always provided somewhere on the property or in the farm. Bringing to light issues like really long hours, 12, 16, 18-hour days, a lot of people not having a day off, making below the minimum wage, lack of proper training and protective equipment, a lot of big issues. And so farm workers did a big analysis of how to approach these problems, and decided that looking at the industry as a whole, that really the power and the money to make a really wide-reaching change was higher up in the food chain with the big brands that are selling milk and dairy products. And so that's what led to the creation of Milk with Dignity, which hopefully some of you have heard of. Milk with Dignity was created to hold large dairy buying companies responsible for labor abuses and housing issues within their supply chains. And then when companies sign on to Milk with Dignity, they agree to only buy their milk from farms which comply with fair living and working standards, which have been defined by farm workers. So that looks like stuff, like having a day off during the week, being paid at least the Vermont state minimum wage, protection from discrimination, from unjust firing, stuff like that. And the company also agrees to pay a premium for the milk. So that means extra money per 100-weight gallon of milk that provides economic relief to dairy farmers as well, because we understand that farmers are really being squeezed and under a lot of economic pressure. And so this extra money coming from the top down is to support farm owners and also to fund the changes that need to be made on farms. Like, if you need to build new housing, that's very expensive. So there needs to be a place for the money to come from. And this is a picture when Ben and Jerry signed on to Milk with Dignity in 2017, after 3 years of a public campaign calling on them to do so. And this was an incredible, monumental day. And I hope you can see it in the faces of the people in this picture. It's had an incredible positive and massive impact on the supply chain, or the farms that Ben and Jerry sources their milk from in the Northeast. And we've seen that things like having a day off, having an increased paycheck makes it more possible for farm workers to exercise this right of being able to apply for a driver's license and be able to access that freedom of movement that provides. And so currently we're in a campaign to expand this program, Milk with Dignity. We're calling on the supermarket Hannaford, because they're a large buyer and retailer of milk, not just in the Northeast, not just in Vermont, but all across the Northeast. So this puts them in a position where they really have this huge opportunity to be able to grow this successful program to cover more farms and more farm workers. And so now we're at the start of 2023. We've been more than 3 years now in this public pressure campaign calling on Hannaford to join Milk with Dignity. And so we need everyone's help to help us get over the finish line and build support for Milk with Dignity. So I wanted to mention some things that you can do, and that's what's on the screen here. Sign up to get involved on the Migrant Justice website. There's a form you can fill out to join our listserv, which is a great way to find out what's going on, get looped in, and I'll put a link to that in the chat. If you're on social media, you can look up Hannaford's Facebook page, and in the comments to the posts, you can add something about Milk with Dignity, your support for Milk with Dignity. If you're close to a Hannaford store, there's a Hannaford store somewhere in your area, we would love to work with you to, what we're saying, adopt your local Hannaford, or plan actions and activities reoccurring at your local store. And that's something we can provide support with and help you brainstorm and think about. So I have the Migrant Justice general email account for more information there. And then lastly, farm workers are planning an organizing tour, doing presentations across Vermont, but also across the Northeast. And so we're planning to go on the road in April, and we would love to come and do a presentation if you're connected to a community group or a faith group or a student group, and any kind of community that you think would be interested in hosting. Please let us know, and we'd love to set up a time to come and do a presentation about Milk with Dignity. So with that, I want to just say another big thank you. I know some of this directly connects to transportation, some of it less directly, but I think it's all part of this bigger picture of dignity and accessing fundamental human rights. So thank you.
Thank you, Madeline. I mean, I think that's the big thing that we are all here to sort of support, is that, a broader picture of civil liberties includes the freedom of movement. If you can't even have the freedom to even think about freedom of movement, whether it's, workplace or other means of oppression, then, that's where we have to start. I put Madeline or Migrant Justice's Facebook and Twitter and website in the chat. feel free to check those resources out if you're looking to continue to support Madeline and all the work that Migrant Justice is doing, because you know that it's incredibly powerful considering all the resources that we use. I mean, for those of us who eat cheese or dairy products, you know, there's a lot of people behind that work that need also our support. Up next, it's Old Spokes Home with John Copans.
Hi there, everyone. I want to thank the Sierra Club so much for putting this together. Peter, I know you put some good work into it, and Rob too. Thanks. We really appreciate that you're shining a light on the topic of transportation equity. At Old Spokes Home, we think that's a pretty important topic. Old Spokes Home, for those who don't know, is a nonprofit bike shop up in Burlington's Old North End, with the mission of transforming lives and communities by creating access to bicycles. I live in Montpelier and take the bus up to the shop in Burlington every day, and it's productive work time for me. And this morning on the bus, I put together my my little outline for what I was going to talk about tonight. And here's the funny thing that happened though, is it was productive. Like, I got the work done on the bus, a little advertisement for riding the bus as really great work time. But then I had the privilege today at 12:30 to be invited. There is a program in the city of Burlington called the City and Lake Semester. It's hosted it's essentially a part of the Burlington School District, and students, high school students, get out into the community for a semester and really think about community design and how to solve problems in the city of Burlington. And I was invited to be a part of a conversation today of a bunch of seniors, elderly folks at the Old North End Community Center. And it was a conversation convened by these high school students. And actually, there was a parallel conversation with a bunch of fourth graders as well. And the idea was, they call it, I think it's called like the 880 city, essentially. Peggy could correct me. Peggy Vivanco was part of this conversation. Oh, good. She's including some links. But anyway, the idea was that you should essentially design your community with 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds in mind. If you've got a community where those two populations can get around and thrive, you have a livable, wonderful community at that point. So essentially, we had two conversations with 80-year-olds or something close to 80-year-olds and 8-year-olds. And man, it, you know, I guess here is what I would say, participating in this and listening to these, all of the folks, the senior citizens in that room, I think not a single one of them has car access, right? That means they are absolutely dependent on other modes of travel to get what they need. You know, one of them talked about once every 2 weeks, there is a trip by bus. The community center takes them out to the grocery store and they shop for that 2-week period, that once every 2 weeks. You know, I go to Shaw's probably once a day, I think, because I just have unlimited, you know, I have the privilege of being able to do that. The idea that I'm going to shop for 2 weeks and plan for that, you know, other folks in that conversation just talked about the things that I wouldn't even necessarily notice. The snowbank, right? The bus that stops and wants to let you off. And in fact, there's a massive snowbank there in front of you. Imagine you're somebody who's using a walker, right? And your task is somehow to get off that bus, to traverse that snow pile, and then to make your way to your destination. Or just the challenge of like carrying those groceries home. How do you get them home? Sidewalk quality. What condition are the sidewalks in? When you're using a walker to get around and those sidewalks are totally sort of crushed and with essentially potholes in them, imagine what that experience is to get around. And it just to sit there today and have that opportunity to listen to folks describe what the obstacles are for them to experience life to the fullest because they're not drivers, because they don't own cars, it felt very timely in light of the conversation that we're having tonight. You know, at Old Spokes Home about a year ago, 2 years ago now, we did something called the Old North End Mobility Audit, and I'm going to share a link to that in the chat. And one of the things that one simple illuminating fact from that audit is that 30% of the households in the Old North End do not have access to a single car. And then something close to another 30% have access to only one car in households where often there's actually need for more than one car. And so at this point, I think I'll shift back to some of what I was going to talk about originally, which is bikes. At Old Spokes Home, as you can imagine, we're pretty passionate about bikes. We don't think they are the solution. I wouldn't go that far by any scope, but we certainly think that they are a solution. When we think about how we navigate, how we get around, and how we do that affordably and in a way that minimizes emissions and, let's say, maximizes joy. Bikes actually, one of the magical things about bikes is that it's the only form of transportation where you are both the passenger and the motor at the same time. And so what that means is you're expending energy and you're getting exercise. You are out there. One of the things, when I have my kids in the car and I'm driving through Montpelier, I drive at like 3 miles an hour. And it's when I drive through downtown Montpelier, and it's because I actually want to be walking on the sidewalk, and I'm not. I'm stuck in the car, but I want to be part of my community when I'm cruising through downtown Montpelier. I want to be saying hi to neighbors. And the beauty of being on a bicycle, just like the beauty of walking in your community, is that you're part of your community. You're connecting with one another. Just tonight, I got off the bus, I hopped on my bike, I started to ride home, and there was my friend Tim on the sidewalk. And like when you're in a car and you see that friend, for the most part, you keep driving because that's what you do when you're driving. But I just pulled over and had a nice chat on the sidewalk with my friend Tim. Bikes, in that way, bikes help to build community because you are part of a community when you're on a bicycle. You're really part of the environment. Another reason that we love bikes is that they are efficient. Essentially, the most efficient way for humans to travel. If you think about a bicycle, and in fact, I happen to have a bike wheel right here, and like I'm gonna spin this wheel, and what you see in that spinning is something that has no friction, right? The magic of rolling on a bicycle is that, think about when you're rolling down a gentle slope. You're not pedaling. You're expending virtually no energy. And yet there you are moving forward. Bikes, the design of the bicycle has literally been the same for almost 150 years because it's a well-conceived object. It's a tremendously simple and efficient object. It's a wonderful way to get around. So, mostly I'm just a bike evangelist, traveling. I'm sort of, and in particular, I guess here's the other thing I'd say about Old Spokes Home. We're not just passionate about bikes. We're really passionate about used bikes. Like, bikes can have multiple lives. Bikes are resilient objects. Used bikes are bikes that we save from the waste stream. And frankly, a bike from the 1980s and 1990s is just as good, in many ways better, than a brand new bike that you can buy today. And so in closing, I guess what I want to just I guess, appeal to you all is that if you're a cyclist, there are a few other organizations. Old Spokes Home, we take in donated bikes, we fix them, and we get them out into the community. We return those bikes into the community, some of them by selling them to folks who can afford to buy them, and then others we distribute through our Everybody Bikes program to those who wouldn't be able to afford them otherwise. There's actually other organizations in Vermont doing the exact same thing. There's the new organization down in Bennington called The Hub that's doing this. There's the Bellows Falls Bike Project in Bellows Falls. There's Free Ride Bike Co-op in Montpelier. There's another little organization up in St. Johnsbury called Link. There's Little City Cycles in Virgins, or there's just your local bike shop. You know, recently the city of St. Albans actually subsidized and recruited a bike shop to move into downtown St. Albans. And why did they do that? Because they understand that bike shops are essentially an essential service for places. You need a place to get your bike fixed. It's obviously part of tourism and part of attracting people to a place. But like, I sort of love that vision of a bike shop, that it's an essential service, and that biking can be one of those things that really unlock and unleash mobility for folks to really be able to get around and to do it in a way that brings them health and joy and independence, and really in an affordable way. So thanks, really appreciate the chance to talk about bikes and why we think they're pretty great.
Thanks, John. You can find him here at oldspokeshome.com. It is a big thing to think about, you know, carbon-free ways to get around that also give you a nice endorphin rush. You don't get that with cars. You don't get that with buses. But, you know, this is the conversation we're having. It's not a silver bullet that we're looking for with transit options. How do we create a silver buckshot that gets at the heart of all the things that we are here to talk about, related to equity, related to freedom of movement, related to accessibility. And with that, I'll pass it off to our final speaker, and his work has been paramount to southeastern Vermont, and I'm really excited to hear about what Randy has to say. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Can everybody see that okay? My name is Randy Schoonmaker. I'm the CEO of Southeast Vermont Transit. Vermont is divided into 7 transit districts, mostly among county or multi-county lines. Our district is Southern Windsor and all of Windham County. We serve 35 towns from the Massachusetts border up to Windsor, over to Ludlow, and all along the Connecticut River Valley. We have 3 major ski resorts that we worked actively with. And we have several large towns, Brattleboro, Springfield, Ludlow, and others that we serve. So our nickname is the Mover. I think Peter said earlier, we have white buses with black spots, and our nickname is the Mover, M-O-O-V-E-R. And as we drive by people, there's people who look at us and go, moo, and we get laughed at a lot, which is great. We like to see the humor in transit. Transit equity, which is the subject for this evening. What is transit equity? It's fairness and mobility and accessibility for everybody. And as our speakers before me have noted, that's not always the case. There's lots of room for transit of all types to grow and to fill in need. But the idea and the goal is to serve everybody. It's tied to environmental justice and to the clientele that you see listed here by the bullets, all of which have special funding sources, all of which need to have more funding for those sources. But as we'll see, transit in Vermont was built for social services, it came out of Council on Aging. It serves Medicaid clients who are low income. It serves the elderly and disabled. And finally, it started running fixed route service and taking over that project, connecting major population centers to each other. And that's your typical gas or diesel bus that you see going up and down the road. But as we'll see before, there's an awful lot more than that, than just a bus going by. The goals are to make sure that we can expand public transit to increase the access and use by the public, and at the same time get cars off the road and mitigate traffic congestion. The Windsor Microtransit program that we're going to see is funded by an act called CMAQ, which is the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Act, special funding source strictly with that purpose in mind. How do we address transit equity? There's a lot of ways to address it. We've come across some of these. We've shared these with others. Others have showed us what are the options and the possibilities. But basically, for advocacy and public participation, data collection and analysis is really the basis of starting to build equity through public transit. And again, public transit's not the cure-all, end-all, as John said about bikes. It is part of the solution, part of the concern, part of the way we need to work. But typically approaching a project, we recommend that you develop a core project team with your state DOT, RPCs, and RDCs. In Vermont, we have the Vermont Agency of Transportation, who is a wonderful sponsor. They funnel federal funds and state funds to us. There's a coordinator for each of our regions that we work very closely with. We work with stakeholder groups. We develop stakeholder groups. We go into towns where we might not be familiar to people within our territory, and we seek out key core team members, and they in turn help us develop stakeholder groups. Series of public meetings before, during, and after a project, surveys of many kinds. These are both handed out in public, they're available online, and those have been tremendously effective in developing new schedules and redesigning routes. We've redesigned basically all of our routes since 2018 to much greater ridership and efficiency. There are social service clients and potential client surveys that can be done, the usual electronic media that we do, follow up and share results, make your plan based on this input. Don't think that you know everything going into a project. We need to listen, and we need to communicate, and communicate. Let everybody know what you're doing each step of the way, address those concerns before the final product, before the final route, before the final schedule is issued. Transit equity legislation, I'm sure everyone's heard of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, also known as Title VI. This is a very large part of our grant following, our grant funding activities that rely on us meeting all the needs of Title VI. There are special programs. There are people who write programs. There's people who write how to follow those programs. It's administered by the U.S. Department of Transportation under the auspices of the Federal Transit Administration, the FTA, and they in turn fund VTrans, who funds the 7 of us public transit operators. So by design and by definition, transit equity is built into the law, is built into everything that we do on a public transit basis throughout the United States, including Vermont. Transit equity in our little state, I could not find anything more recent than 2015, but in 2015, Vermont was the highest spending per capita public transit state in the United States. And the last I heard a year or so ago is we had slipped to second, but really pretty incredible. Vermont cities are small. Most neighborhoods are covered with fixed routes. We only have one urban system in the state, which is obviously Chittenden County. The rest of our state is considered very rural. There's a very large layer of transit throughout Vermont that focuses on need and equity. And all these programs are free. Medicaid services, low income, non-emergency medical transportation service that goes to dialysis, chemotherapy, opioid addiction, the pharmacy, regular doctor's visits. It's all free. It's all done on demand. Rides are delivered by either a small van or a volunteer driver. There's the E&D or 5310 program for people 60 and over. Doctor's visits, social, meal sites, shopping, adult day, and persons with disability. We give everybody in our region, as far as we can stretch our funding, 3 visits, 3 trips a month to do whatever you want to do. If you want to go shopping, if you want to go visit somebody, if you want to go to the hairdressers, we have funding for that. And so do the other operators in the state. They all may manage their funding a little bit differently. In our neck of the woods, we're lucky to be able to provide all those different types of trips. Everybody's heard of the ADA. Within a quarter of a mile of any fixed route, you must have curb to curb service off that route to transport anybody where the fixed route would go. The VA has a good medical transportation program. They work with us. A relatively new program, Recovery and Jobs Access Grant, strictly for people who are recovering from opioid addiction and need to get back on their feet with a job interview and maybe the first couple of weeks of their new job, should they land one. Rides to Wellness is a program that covers medical trips for people who don't fit into the Medicaid or E&D categories above. This is a great program. It started in the Mount Escutney Hospital in Windsor, and it's been done now in Rutland and in St. Johnsbury. The money is given to the hospital. They work with their social service people and their caregivers to determine who needs a ride for wellness. And there are also private grants and town vans. And I mentioned, at least in our area, the town of Londonderry and the town of Vernon have a van that's sponsored by the town. And especially in Londonderry, I think they're up to 2 vans now. They'll take people where they need to go, regardless of age or income. And this is something that for a rural town, I think is a great model. I think having a town van is just as important as having police, fire, town roads, schools, etc. I wish more towns would be like Londonderry. The real story of transportation equity is volunteers. Volunteers is just a great program. You'll never see a volunteer rider car. Usually you might see somebody with a little sticker on the side like this lady's vehicle, but absolutely critical to what we do in Vermont. 40% of the public transit rides in Vermont are done by volunteers. So you pass volunteers every day that you're in your car or on your bike or walking down the street. Our volunteers are not paid. They're not an employee. They're not covered by our insurance. They're reimbursed for their mileage, and it's not considered income by the IRS. So you can volunteer as little or as much as you want. You use your own vehicle. And you can tell us how many days, what kind of trips you want to do. Typically, we take one person at a time, long distances with volunteers, to dialysis, to opioid treatment. These volunteers are out 7 days a week, all hours of the morning, some of them starting at 4 in the morning. And we used to have in our area 70 volunteers. We have less than 30 now as a result of the pandemic, trying very hard to continue to recruit more of them. But they're just invisible, but they are out there. It's neighbors helping neighbors, very cost effective, especially at 66.5 cents a mile. A public transit ride for a van right now is usually around $14 a mile. This is incredibly less expensive, reaches all areas of the state. Everybody has a volunteer program. The largest one is probably in the Northeast Kingdom. I think Southeast Vermont has the second largest, but there is a volunteer program in every county. And it's just a great example of what makes Vermont, Vermont. It's neighbors helping neighbors. Just an awesome program. I want to just touch briefly on Windsor Microtransit because it is a big part of equity. I think we heard Amanda talking about the challenges that the towns in her area face. With 35 of our towns, we have many towns that don't have any fixed route service whatsoever. So we were given a grant to study 2 towns in our area, and every transit provider in Vermont was given that same opportunity. It was funded by VTrans. We brought in a consultant and we studied all the towns, and we picked Windsor in our area. First of all, what is microtransit? It's Uber with a van. It's really very simple. It's mover with a van. And in our case, it's a lift equipped van. So unlike a volunteer car, which doesn't have a lift, might be able to put a walker or fold up a wheelchair to put it in the back of the vehicle. But our vehicles are all lift equipped. And most of the people who will ride this will know somebody or have somebody in their family who at some point is going to need help with a mobility device. We picked Windsor because it's got a hospital, it's got a high school, it's got light industry, it's got senior housing, it's got shopping. And what we designed there after extensive public outreach, we were out in the community for 5 months soliciting input, so that we knew at the end of the 5 months what the town wanted and what would succeed. We came up with Monday through Friday from 6 in the morning till 6 at night. We had an employee who needed to get to work at 6 o'clock at Simon Pierce Glass Blowing. So we started it at 6. We were going to start at 7, but that person is riding every day now and will have job security because of this program. It's free. It's open to everybody. There's no age or income requirements. You do need to make a reservation. We do have a software program. We can pick you up with as little as 30 minutes notice. And the software program is not to scare anybody. It's how we schedule and can manage the program on the fly. But we encourage people to make reservations by calling us. So you can talk to a live person. We can walk you through it. There's an online app and there's a phone app as well. So there's 3 different ways to book a ride. We're in our 3rd week of service. We're doing about 15 rides a day. We hope to get it up to 35 or 40 as we get going here. But 2 of our first 3 weeks have been plagued by either a snowstorm or a cold front. So we're hoping for more typical weather, and especially as we get towards spring, to get people out and about more. We had to stay within the town of Windsor guidelines. Otherwise, we would be running up to Dartmouth and we would be going here, there, and every place else, and we wouldn't be able to provide a large volume of rides. So Windsor having a hospital and being more self-contained than a typical Vermont town, this is why we picked this area, and this is why we're pretty sure this is going to work. Windsor is very rural. It's around 4,000 people. And if we do decide that we have more capacity, we can get down to Wethersfield or go over to another neighboring town and expand it. But for right now, we're happy to stay in Windsor and make sure we can chew what we bit off. This is a 2-year pilot, and at the end of that, VTrans will determine whether they'll continue funding it or not. So there are 5 of these in the state. Besides the initial one that was in Montpelier, there are 4 more besides ours. If I remember correctly, it's Manchester, Morrisville, Middlebury, and Barrie. Microtransit, we'd love to be able to do it for every town. It's a pilot program. It's a concept. This program is substantially different than Montpelier's. Montpelier took 3 buses off the road, canceled 3 fixed routes, and put that money towards microtransit. It's a good idea. Hopefully it'll continue to work out. In Brattleboro, which would be our next pilot, we would operate a van from 5 at night until 11:30 at night for 2nd and 3rd shift workers. And we're also, I'm part of the group that is hosting the 140 Afghan refugees who moved into Southern Vermont last January. We're doing travel training with them. We're working closely with their employers to get them back and forth to work and to school and to register their kids in school and get licenses and learn English, et cetera, et cetera. It's a great story. There's larger programs in Burlington and Rutland, but in our little neck of the woods, it's been so rewarding to work with the refugees, and there's more coming. So a microtransit may have its place. Finally, what can you do? Advocate. Go on Google. There are programs, there are projects, there are grant and funding opportunities. The local, state government, local transit company, they're all very easy to reach in Vermont. It's a very simple Google. We would love to see more people serve on a board or a team or even better yet, volunteer to drive. It's a very simple project, very simple process to apply and get on. It's immensely rewarding. Several of us have videos on our websites, and we talked to this lady who travels into the far reaches where a van would have trouble going to pick up a lady in a wheelchair, and who can stow it in the back, but she goes to dialysis 3 days a week. She lives out in Plymouth, and she's got to go all the way to West Leb, New Hampshire, 3 days a week, including Saturday. And this volunteer is making that possible. And don't be afraid to, if you see a bus coming by or look up a schedule, hop on a bus, try it out. It's not that bad. It's especially if you can ride in something that's white with black spots. So, thank you.
Thanks, Randy. I think my favorite thought that came to mind when you were speaking was the idea of transit community. And I think that that's kind of what we're thinking about here is how do we build a society that functions for movement of people as well as for sale of cars, you know? And it seems as though everyone here has been doing really great work with that. So if only we can continue these efforts and go to the website that I shared about Southeast Vermont Transit and Mover to support Randy and everybody else who came to speak. Before we go, I want to say thank you to everyone for coming on. If anyone has any questions for any of our speakers, feel free to raise your hand or unmute, and we'll have a little bit of time here at the end to have those questions answered. Oh, Peggy, yeah.
Sorry, I just couldn't. Shh, hold on. Sorry, still have kids home. A question for Randy, with your microtransit pilot there. Do you make any connections? I'm from Burlington, so I was looking at the map and realizing like the park and ride, the nearest park and ride looked like it was just outside of Windsor. Do you have those connections, or is it you really are confined to the lines on your map?
No, we made an exception to go up Route 5 as far as the exit 9 park and ride, so we do connect.
Okay,
Good
great.
question.
Richard, I think I saw you next, if you'd like to go.
This isn't a question, it's just appreciation for these programs and for the speakers. I attend in part to think about how organizations such as my church or Vermont Interfaith Power and Light can plug into some of these programs. And really, I wrote down, I got quite a good number of ideas really from these presentations, from migrant justice down to microtransit. And I guess I would say, Randy, it's been a goal of mine very soon to jump on the bus in Bristol and do a circle. I go into Montpelier all the time and I'm always thinking, why the heck am I driving? So I'm gonna do it and leave the car in the driveway. But thanks, everybody.
Any last questions before we get going? All right, well, thank you, everyone. If you guys are interested in keeping up with the Sierra Club, I'll post our Instagram and Facebook in the chat as well. For you guys to follow all of our activism related to transportation, clean energy, and protecting the environment here in Vermont. Thank you again to our speakers. We really couldn't have done this without you. We're really excited to see where all of your work goes in the future, and please keep in touch so we can help support you guys as best we can in whatever ways we can. Does any of the Sierra Club members have any last minutes statements before we go?
Peter, I noticed that there was a question in the chat. Just wanted to make sure it got.
I hadn't been checking it. My bad.
It's all right. It says, do we know if there's any effort to study the racial equity of transit funding in Vermont? From what I can tell, all census tracts with more than 15% of residents that are people of color get service that costs less than $5 per rider, compared to lots of recent investments that cost over $15 per riders, or some commuter service that costs up to $30 per rider. Something to think about as we advocate for funding priorities.
Rob, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, I don't have the full answer, but actually because of the Agency of Transportation gains so much funding from the federal government, they're already focusing on a lot of equity work. So it's something that they are doing. There is a whole transit equity framework that they're putting together, but that specifics I'm not really 100% sure of. So I'll look into that and get a more detailed answer. And who was it who made that
was
question?
Michael Arnold.
Michael?
And then, just to add, Justice Forty, from the White House, the Biden administration, with all the federal funding that's coming, the mandate is to have 40% of it, 40% of funding go to EJ communities. That is a strict part of the requirement for the funding pieces. So it won't undo the wrongs of the past necessarily, but it will at least begin to address some of the inequities.
To answer the question about, I'm sorry, to answer the question about are there any studies, there's none that I know of. Peggy's right about the funding, and we've certainly looked into that, and a lot of that I think I know that it's directed at urban areas. And in Vermont, as I mentioned, there's only one small urban transit agency that might apply to, which would be GMT. But I need to double check that. But as far as I know, there's no studies underway yet.
Thank you for your question, though. I'm glad that we got to have multiple people respond. It's that transit equity community that we are hoping to uplift around here. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and be sure to follow us at sierraclub.com.org/Vermont for more upcoming events. Next week, we'll have a community conversation for anybody who's interested in hearing about regional geothermal. But until then, we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.